Let's jump back into one of my favorite topics, the production of old school house drums. And we're going to take a look at some techniques, some approaches, and things to consider in order to get them to sound nice and energetic, but kind of old school at the same time. All right, so to get started, let's just quickly check out all the drums that we have together. Sounds pretty cool and energetic, so there's lots of stuff that we can break down. Something that I personally like and that, in my opinion, can add a lot of nice energy to old school house drums is a nice Conga Groove. So let's start with the Conga Groove over here. Okay, the Conga Groove itself just consists of two sounds. We have this high Conga sample and this low Conga sample. And then just to like give it a grid in order for my ears to have something to work towards, I like to add a clap and maybe like something like a crash sound in the beginning. So we have this 909 clap and this 909 crash. All right, how do we get this to work nicely with just two samples? So first of all, you need two pretty good samples. So these are not your typical Conga sample if you just recorded it yourself with a mic. I feel like many old school house Conga samples, obviously they're Conga samples, but they're produced in a way that they have a lot of mid-range, not just like some click in the beginning and a bit of body. Like they sound very cool, very well produced. Also, they're kind of come as a couple because they sound very similar. You can tell they're from the same sample pack, the same recording session, produced in a similar way. If you listen carefully to the room that you have on there, like the reverb, you can tell that they're carefully placed. They have room on there. You can see on this sample that there is some stereo information because you have like these two waveforms in the tail overwhelming, which means you have a different signal for left and right. So finding two congas that work nicely together and sound like semi-natural is pretty cool. All right, let's look at the rhythm. In order to get it nice and energetic, there's a lot of focus on the downbeats and you have a lot of sounds playing, right? So kind of quickly playing. That's something that can add some nice energy. In order to get that to sound kind of natural, we can do some slight variation in the pitch and timing. I already have other videos about speaking about swing and these kind of things in Groove, and also in Ableton Live you have the option of this groove pool. But sometimes I like to do it manually, also because if you take a look at the sample, it doesn't start at zero, right? It kind of has this fade in, I would say, not fade in, but doesn't start right away. So kind of listening and placing these sounds carefully can be nice for something like a Conga Groove that you want to sound medium natural, but still kind of have this sampled drum machine vibe. So what I did here, you have congas kind of focusing, hits focusing on the downbeat where the kick would usually be playing. And in order to kind of have the other sounds work into those spots, you can add, for example, to this note, a bit of swing, which has a bit more swing because the sample starts a bit later, and then reduce the velocity a bit. So the focus kind of goes onto this hit over here. And then this one is a bit louder, the lower conga hit, and it plays like on this eighth note where usually an open high note would be playing. So since it doesn't come that often, you can have it a bit louder and it adds some cool vibe. And then lastly, these three consecutive notes, I would definitely go in there and do something about the timing, like switch it up a little bit, and also have the reduce the velocities. No normal human being would be able to 3 times play exactly the same sound with your hand. And also just a good player would just add some swing and some variations on. None of this is necessary just because it's being humanized, like because you couldn't play it, but also because a good player would add it to add something to the groove. And then if you wanted to sound even a bit more natural, you could duplicate the track and then add some more variation. I'm just going to skip that for now. So let's bring in the bass drum. Something that's pretty cool in old school house is you can have these almost ridiculously sounding distorted bass drums. By itself, it has so much high end, it almost sounds like a hardstyle kick. I reduced it a bit in length, as I mentioned in the last video, that if you need a bit less sub energy, you can cut the tail a bit. But otherwise, this bass drum is pretty beefy and nice and fat. Like I said, it sounds pretty distorted and crazy. But in context, because the congas have so much mid-range energy, it kind of gets masked. So masking is when one sound is in a certain frequency range, which is louder and just masks, like covers another sound. So if you play these together, the distortion, which by itself sounds a bit, seems a bit much, now just like makes the kick cut through a little bit and doesn't sound that crazy because it gets kind of masked by the congas. Next thing that can add a lot of nice energy and is very common in old school house is a good tambourine groove. So in this case, it's quite simple. In this case, tambourines, they can be kind of tough if you just have one sample and throw that into a sequencer. That's something that has been happening in old school house and something that can sound good. Here, I wanted something that sounded a bit more natural, but still has this like repetitive vibe. So I went for a tambourine loop, which consists of 4 hits. If you play a tambourine like this, like the inward and outward motion, they sound kind of different. So you can pick 1 or 2 samples or a few more, but you run into the same problem as with the congas, that if you pick different samples, it can sound nice together, but it can also sound weird. Usually doesn't sound that natural, which can be cool and like certain sounds and styles that you want to go for. Here, if I wanted to go for something slightly natural, it's nice to have like a short loop, but then just repeat this short loop over time, right? So it sounds repetitive, but kind of natural, a bit of best of both worlds, let's say. Something I forgot to say about the tambourine is I feel like because it's very constant, it just adds some good energy, and it's a sound that's pretty persistent, but since it's so thin and fine, it kind of gives some good speed and some good energy without being too present and too obnoxious and messing with other sounds. That's why I feel like tambourines are oftentimes in these old school house grooves quite present. Something else that we can bring in, we have this 909 clap. 909 sounds have been used in underground and old school stuff, as well as in very commercial things. And in order to kind of distance yourself from certain commercial productions, which just have the basic 909 sounds, you can add some sounds which are not that common anymore. And that's, for example, this classic snap sound. Here it's layered with a snare. And then also a snare sound like this, layered with a clap, which can help us to create some more groove stuff. So let's bring in just the snap. Sounds a bit quirky and weird, right? But that's sometimes something you might be looking for. Okay, so we have the snare, which is kind of playing in synchronicity with the clap, and then some jacking snares, which in this case is also layered with a clap, but it kind of works nicely together. So what you can do once you have these, like a loop like this with like 1 or 2 snares coming in, duplicate it, add a few more snares, duplicate it again and add even more. So you kind of have this progression over time, which almost leads you to some a drum fill in the end. So you can use this for variation, already have that ready for your arrangement, because fills like this are very common 90s old school house. And just like with the congas, you can do some timing and velocity variation in order to have a bit of a groove and swing in there, and do that. Yeah. Now the congas can get maybe a bit annoying over time, or we need some more in there. So I added a few more percussion sounds. Here, I like to go for something quirky and classic, like Latin percussions. Okay, another conga sound, a conga slap. Let's listen to that. So the congas coming in playing like this. This little hit, or it's almost like a bongo, is playing exactly where there's no note in the Conga groove. And then where you have the low conga playing, the shaker goes on top, right? Because this high sounding bongo conga thing would clash lapping over a conga like this, but the rattle sound, the shaker can go over the low conga. All right, something else that's kind of cool to include in something like this are some instrument sounds which you can layer in like kind of quietly. For example, this guitar sound over here. Very quiet. And why do I do that? I like some clean samples to work with, but in old school times, many people have sampled drums from records and from vinyl. And many times they looked for the cleanest sample they can find. But oftentimes there is some dirt, some stuff in there, some tail from another sound, maybe a quick, quiet guitar thing that's just not the guitar playing, but like still like from the delay or something like this. So if you throw in some random stuff like this, it can really silently like add something to the vibe of the track. Let's check that out for a second without the snap maybe. Also at this stage, we can already add some more percussions. I had this lower, almost tom sounding sound. Pretty nice. It kind of works nicely together also with the guitar thing, right? Check it out. I like it. And then now that we have enough elements that sound kind of old school and vibey, we can just go for the classic open 909 hat. But instead of just having it play all the way through, maybe to kind of tease it in, we can just have it play one hit in the beginning. Or with all of them. Tambourine and Open 909 together, they're also kind of a winning team. So yeah, I intentionally didn't speak too much about the processing because there's almost none on there. But in coming videos, we can obviously focus a bit more on mixing and maybe first focus on this melodic stuff over here and then bring it all together in a mixing video. All right, to finish things off, let's see what we got. Conga Groove. Kick. Tambourine. Cool. Snap and snare, more percussions. Lastly, our open hat. Yeah, all right. I hope you found the video helpful. Feel free to let me know about any questions you have, and I hope to see you soon. Ciao.